One thing that I hope we prove today, Dr. Hein, is the old adage that two Heins are better than one. All right, then. Or we could say we don't want to get, we have to hurry along because we don't want to get behind. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to Encounters USA with author Matthew Heines. If you're looking for alien incidents, Bigfoot brouhahas, or Dogman dealings, we have the podcast interviews, field research, and field interviews you're gonna love. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and check us out on Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Encounters USA. I have an amazing guest today, and I tell you, I am so excited. I am so happy that he is here because, first of all, Dr. Simeon Hein is an amazing individual with an amazing background. Second of all, I have been trying to get a remote viewer on here forever. So this is just really going to be an amazing show because of Dr. Hein's experience. Dr. Simeon Hein, welcome to Encounters USA.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Thanks for having me here today.
All right, young man. Now, we have got quite, besides having almost the same name, we also have the distinction of having the same alma mater. So that is Washington State University.
There you go.
Go Cougs. And if we have time at the end of the podcast, Simeon and I are going to sing the Cougar fight song. So be ready for that. Yes. And I don't know how excited Dr. Hein is, but I certainly am. So we'll try to save some time at the end. All right. So Dr. Hein, the first thing that we want to do is you're an author and a researcher, and you have an incredible background. But let's get into your educational background first. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you became Dr. Simeon Hein?
Well, Matthew, we both went to the same school. I went to WSU back in the late 80s, early 90s. When were you there?
We were there at the same time. I studied history. I was in the history department.
Yeah, we were different buildings, right?
Yeah, I spent most of my time at Wilson. Yeah, I was in Wilson Hall most of the time.
Wilson Hall. So we probably crossed paths, Matthew, without knowing it.
Yep, isn't that funny?
And we probably knew some of the same. Yeah, we probably knew some of the same people. And yeah, I was there. Late 80s, early 90s. Started 87.
I started 88.
And I ended up getting my PhD there.
Wow.
In 92, 90, something like that. Yeah.
Yep. Well, let me ask you, and we're not going to try to bore people with wow, but do you remember Rusty's, the bar and grill up on Campus Heights? I managed that in 91 after I graduated. I managed Rusty's for 6 months, yeah. And also, my claim to fame for this channel is that I live down, Rainy Park, where the swimming pool is?
Yeah.
Grover Krantz lived down there, and I was 2 houses down from him. So he had a guy that lived in his house, took care of his house for him. So he'd take us and show us. We kind of partied with the guys. So he'd show us Grover's Bigfoot stuff. And then I guess the funny thing is that I came from Sequim to go to WSU. Grover Krantz went from WSU and he moved to Sequim. And I assume just to get away from me. I don't know why else he would do that. And you know Grover Krantz is the Bigfoot guy, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So
yeah,
all right.
Matthew, I got to tell you, this was not something I studied at the time. I mean, I was really focused on my sociology stuff.
Yeah.
I never heard the word Bigfoot mentioned while I was there. UFOs were never mentioned once. I don't think I heard the word ever come up in my 5 years at WSU.
Really?
The stuff I do now led from the work I did at WSU, but at the time I was like focused on my statistics. I ended up actually teaching at WSU.
Great! Wow, what fun!
As an assistant professor. It wasn't always fun because it was statistics, and as you know, undergrad students don't always like statistics courses, so I survived. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I had to take those for my education classes, and I actually thought they were interesting. And it's really a nice discipline because it gives you a different way to think about things because you have evidence, you have facts. What else was I going to...
Matthew, I just got to say one thing. Your signal is breaking up a little bit. How am I coming across on your side?
You're fine. I don't know why that is. It should be okay. All right. Well, Simeon, let's quit talking about the good old days. There was one thing I wanted to. Oh yeah. I was going to tell you because you had never heard of UFOs. My first time hearing of UFOs was my roommate read a book about Roswell. And he was telling us, there was me and him, and then we had this little gang that hung out at our house across from the swimming pool. And he was telling us that there was a crash in Roswell, and there were aliens that they found. And this is back in 80, 89, 90. So this is when all this stuff was first coming out. So that was how I heard about it. But like you, I'm interested in my history degree, and I don't care. I didn't care about Bigfoot. I thought, well, maybe it's out there, but not really big deal. So, Simeon, let's stop talking about, as interesting as I am, let's talk about you. Now, you graduated from WSU. You're a PhD. You taught there, and then you got into writing books. So let me find your books very quickly because I want people to know that they will be listed on the comment section on the YouTube video. So your books are...
There they are.
There's Opening Minds. Yay. So there's Opening Minds, and I don't have the subtitle for that. You can talk to us about that. Then you have Planetary Intelligence, 101 Steps to Energy, Well-Being and Natural Insight, and A Sociologist Encounters Witnesses to... That is not correct, is it? What's the title of that? Of your third book?
A Sociologist Encounters Witnesses
that is
to Unexplained Aerial Craft, Their Occupants, and Other Elements of the Multiverse.
Okay, that is it. I thought that was the subtitle, and I had completely forgot to write down the title. So Simeon, let's go chronologically. The first one you wrote was A Sociologist Encounters Witnesses, right?
The first one I wrote was Opening Minds.
Oh, okay,
Extraordinary Encounters, Crop Circles, and Resonance.
Okay, well, let's talk about...
Classic. It's almost 20 years old at this point. I can't believe it.
Wow, almost as old as us. Boy, it's really getting up there.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's start with Opening Minds then. Opening Minds to what?
Well, the type of training I got at WSU, and I imagine almost everyone else gets the same sort of training, is really based heavily on a certain point of view that comes out of the Western scientific tradition. And that tradition says pretty much that you can only study things that are sort of not only repeatable and that you have evidence for, but can be demonstrated on command over and over again. Kind of like you put the key in the car and the engine starts, and you and I can both predict pretty much that if we go out and put our key in the car, it's most likely going to start right at this moment, right? But as I discovered after graduating WSU, there are a whole range of phenomena that do seem to have a lot of evidence for them. And they are repeatable, but they're repeatable in a large statistical sense, maybe not at the moment, but over a large period of time. And those phenomena are less studied by science because it's simply more challenging and more difficult to do so. And so as a sociologist, I realized that there's a whole range of phenomena that science doesn't look at because it's more difficult and more challenging, and it's not likely to get you any brownie points. It's not likely to get you promoted. It's not likely to get you tenure or grants from the National Science Foundation.
Yeah.
So within science, there's a bias towards studying what's always been studied, and to push away those topics which have not been easy to prove or demonstrate. And so we're kind of blinded by our own biases against a range of phenomena. And not all of those phenomena are invisible. Things that are, you can't quite see what's going on, like remote viewing, like we'll talk about in a moment, or so forth. They are more events that, because they're more rare and you don't exactly know when they're going to pop up again, it's easy to ignore them. And so as a professional scientist, you're more likely to pick a topic like the coronavirus, which is in the news and on top of things, and you know you're going to get funding for, and no one's going to criticize you for studying the coronavirus, right? But let's say you want to study Bigfoot. Thousands of Bigfoot sightings all over the place. Even here in Colorado, we have hundreds of them, right, over the years. But it's not easy to show because we don't know where Bigfoot's going to pop up next. So the reason I called my book Opening Minds is I realized that after I got my PhD at WSU, I mean, WSU is a fine place to get a PhD. Nothing wrong with the institution itself. This would apply to any modern academic institution. You are likely not to study these sort of, as I call them now, black swan ghost topics because they don't easily fit within the tradition of Western science. There is evidence for them. In the case of remote viewing, like 100 years of evidence from thousands and thousands of studies. But it's still not easy to demonstrate exactly when it's going to work again exactly. You could take a very good remote viewer, or some of the best of them, and they're still going to miss their targets. So we don't have the ease of proving the existence of the phenomenon in the same way. You have to look at the bigger picture, and our modern science doesn't do that. So I called the book Opening Minds because I realized we need to open our minds to another range of phenomena that really probably do matter to us, but we really haven't looked at.
So I have two questions out of that. The first one is, you say that in the WSU Western culture, we're always looking for replicable, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but repeatable results to satisfy our, that's how we prove stuff is real or it isn't. So is there another culture like China or India where they're a little bit less conservative towards these kinds of topics? Have you found that?
Yeah, Matthew, I did. I had a lot of experience teaching in Japan. In about 15 years ago, I taught for a publishing company over there, remote viewing classes in Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, a whole bunch of different Japanese cities, 5 different times. So I had some experience with Eastern culture, a little more. Not that Japan is a totally representative of Eastern culture, but it's more like a fusion of Eastern and Western cultures. And I would say there's less of a bias towards these type of phenomena, perhaps because those cultures are older, like India, for example. They've been around for a long time, or China. China has, these practices of Qigong, right, and Tai Chi, where they recognize there's some sort of properties going on there that can be demonstrated but are not easy always to replicate.
Okay.
So they have concepts of chi and there's concepts of prana. And I think in Eastern religions, there's kind of this sense that the material world is an illusion. So you should be looking for other things beyond what you can immediately see. So that is sort of in contrast to our Western tradition. So for that reason, they're possibly more open to the science of these phenomena. And now what I'm talking about here is not just blind belief in these things because your culture tells you it's true. I'm talking about looking at real evidence and the biases that Western scientists have, the kind of really stupid explanations and reasons they come up for not looking at these phenomena. And believe me, they're really stupid, Matthew. That they're really dumb reasons for not looking at this. And all I'm saying is, I think in Eastern cultures, you don't have those dumb reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. You don't have this resistance to possibly looking at it. I think these phenomena are verifiable, but it just takes more time.
Well, Dr. Simeon, this is one thing that we're constantly talking about on this show, is that, you're talking about, the Western tradition is that we want repeatable experiments. But no matter how much evidence you present, there are UFOs or Bigfoot or Dogman, the government with these three things is adamant. There is no credible evidence. There's tons of credible evidence, but they can every time they just say, well, there's no credible evidence. So even beyond the replicable, I don't know if that's the right word, the replicable experience, you also have that wall you're running into where it is a government organized thing to hide this stuff away. So that's what we talk about a lot on this podcast when we're talking about these things, because the evidence is there, and it's just a fact of the government not wanting to do it. And you talked about reasons. And we talk about reasons too. And like with Bigfoot, people talk about, well, people are going to want to protect it. They're going to want to close off all the logging land. People are going to want to go out and hunt it. And with UFOs, that's why I kind of brought you in here, Dr. Simeon, is because you're going to be able to explain to us a little bit more than what we know. But with UFOs, we don't know why the government doesn't want us to know. And I think personally that the truth is so frightening that of what reality is that we're better off not knowing. And that's just my personal opinion. So, but we are talking about all those topics on here. So, let's talk a little bit about. You mentioned your planetary intelligence. You want to talk a little bit about that? It's Planetary Intelligence: 101 Steps to Energy, Well-Being, and Natural Insights.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say one thing about the government. It isn't that the government denies that this is real. I mean, the government in our country is not monolithic, first of all. There's lots of different branches. We know now from recent information that's come forth about the ATIP program and the so-called OSCUP program out of the Department of Defense. They were studying these phenomena, Matthew. You're aware of this. They studied these things at Skinwalker Ranch and other places where there were plenty of strange creatures, Bigfoot and other things. And people that have worked in those programs have said it's real. Now, we've had other information recently about the Navy Tic Tac incident. So what has been going on? Let me just say what I think has been going on. The powers that be have been studying these phenomena the whole time. It first started as a concern about the threat from Chinese and Soviet psychics. We have all the declassified CIA papers that show us that this was considered a threat to national security. Mm-hmm. So there were plenty of studies about this and research, but it was classified. That's the big difference here, is when you have classified programs, you're also putting out counter information to put spin on it to make it look like you're not studying this, and all the people who study it are nuts, right? They're absolutely nuts if they study this stuff. But the government has been studying this, at least the Department of Defense, through different programs. Mm-hmm. And they didn't classify the programs, but they hid them under these acronyms so no one knew what they were. You know, Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications. How would you know that pertains to Bigfoot? Mm-hmm. That doesn't sound like it's anything to do with Bigfoot, but they were studying Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, you know, northern Utah, where you've had a lot of strange things happening for a long, long time. And even the Native Americans out there knew about these, but the government considered it a possible national security threat. You know, they threw Bigelow and all. So anyway, they do study these things, but we don't hear about it. I just want to make that clear. before we go on to planetary intelligence. So it's kind of complicated. I mean, we do hear disinformation, Project Blue Book, things like that, right? But at the other time, there's other elements of the government that are studying that say, well, the public shouldn't know because, as you're saying, could be scary, right? So we're just going to tell them it's all swamp gas and ice crystals and reflections of the light of Venus on flocks of geese, while there's an aurora going on, and that'll confuse people enough so that we will stop looking at it, because secretly there are people that really do want to look at it, and we do deserve to know, what the truth about that is, because we want to make sure, it's our government. What are they doing? So our representatives certainly want to know about this. Anyway, just clear it up. It's not a total monolithic denial. It's partly disinformation, which leads its way back to academia and rewards those academics that ridicule the phenomena, right? Let's be honest what goes on here. We've got funding going back to people that are more likely to ridicule the phenomena than to take it seriously. After all, people like you and me were at WSU now and in the same departments, right, with our interests. And we could get funding for studying Bigfoot and UFOs and all sorts of interesting phenomena related to prana and chi and all these other things. I'm sure the students would love that, and there'd be lots of stuff. Anyway, you can see what I'm saying here. Is it has to do with policy, a kind of a complex policy. On one hand, we got to study this for national security reasons. On the other hand, we can't tell anyone about it because, well, it's classified. So you get in this kind of stovepiped situation where the studies are being done. People who know about they know about all this stuff. They know about it. It's just are they going to talk about it? That's the question. And are they going to fund programs that create disinformation so the rest of us have been told that it's bunk when in fact there is actually evidence for it? So I'm just saying it's complex. Now let me talk about planetary intelligence for a second. So the reason really why I wanted to write a book about this is people kept asking me what the best way to, since this was my first book about remote viewing and all these other phenomena that I started studying after I graduated, 92, is people said, well, how can I make myself a better remote viewer? And remote viewing, Matthew, is this ability to perceive things at a distance, non-local information, using your intuition. I call them subtle senses sometimes. Whatever this mechanism we have for receiving information, we can accurately receive information from things at a distance. And it's way beyond what traditional Western science accepts as our senses. We think of our senses as these physical things, but we have these other senses, and some of those can be trained to accurately receive information from distant objects, people, and places. And again, back to what I said a few seconds ago, we know this because it was the good old Defense Intelligence Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency that funded all of this research in the 70s and possibly before in the 60s, classified research, into human non-local perception through a variety of means. Back on the East Coast, at Fort Meade, at SRI in Palo Alto, California. And so planetary intelligence is sort of my sense of kind of a therapy that we can all do every day to kind of get over this mechanistic mindset that we've all gotten ourselves into, thinking that the only things that are real are the things that we're told are real, which is to, for a few minutes every day, expand our perception and awareness of space and time naturally, to feel things that are on a cosmological scale, and to kind of be aware that we're on a living planet that's moving through a solar system, that's moving through a galaxy in this huge system, and just to kind of feel what sort of information becomes available to you when you expand your horizon. Because, and I'll just say one more thing and then let you get back to asking questions because I had a long run here. My dissertation at WSU, Matthew, was about fractals.
Oh, great.
Fractal geometry. self-similar geometry, and a principle that I came up with then, which I could see happening, and I know it's almost been proven now, fractal flattening, the opposite, where our perception becomes focused on smaller and smaller time increments. Nanosecond culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we're just focused on smaller and smaller intervals of time and kind of lose a sense of context. So the information itself becomes devalued because it's not connected to something bigger. And I called that fractal flattening. So planetary intelligence is, my antidote to fractal flattening, which is to take a few minutes every day and go for a long walk or do something that doesn't have an immediate narrow focus, just to kind of feel that sense of being part of something bigger.
Amazing. Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's always been my experience. You're so amazingly brilliant. You have so many ideas. I think one thing you should look at as a sociologist is how does the stuff we're talking about, how do you compare how that is accepted in a democracy where you have politicians that don't want to talk about anything that is not mainstream, that's going to get them, people might question their vote for them. So I think that in countries like Russia and China, I think in Japan, it's a lot more accepted. This also has to do with the education and the culture of the people. But I think that you should look into how our political system has just been instrumental in aiding this and thousands of cover-ups. And I was listening to Jesse Ventura. He's kind of interesting. And he said that he looked at the last time he looked, there were 220 million classified documents. That means the government is classifying everything they do. So that would be very interesting because we're not getting more open. This is getting actually scary.
Matthew,
all right.
Who is it that said that we have 220 million? You broke up on my side when you said that. Who?
Well, Jesse Ventura said that. Jesse Ventura, the governor, and he said, now there's 220 million or something. I don't know what it was 220 million. I don't know if that's each year or whatever, but basically everything the government does now, they are trying to classify it. Okay, so planetary intelligence then, according to Dr. Simeon Hein, is an awareness of the planet, right? It's a awareness you're on a spinning ball, and you're going around the sun, and the sun's going around the solar system. Is that what we're talking about, planetary intelligence?
Yeah, because I think with all the technology we have around us, there's a tendency to forget that we are still part of the natural world. Every breath of air we take, every time we drink water, eat food, we are interacting with nature in some way. And the way a lot of us interact with it is through these packaged control systems. Even with information now, we get the information through a device instead of through the senses we're born with. And it's not that that's inherently wrong. It just seems to me that it can create a limiting sense of resonance, that you're focused on a kind of a very repeatable kind of routine set of patterns, which is not how nature really works.
Right.
Nature has a lot of variation in it. This is why when you look around you, things are built like fractals, like trees. Mm-hmm. They can lose a branch, but the rest of the tree will still be there in a windstorm. So they have this resiliency, and Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility. And so the reason it's important to stay connected to nature is because nature gives us an inherent resiliency that we lose if we package too much of our time and perception into these narrow little evenly spaced boxes. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like we need to use the technology we have around us and enjoy the benefits of it, but not forget that we're on the larger scale. We don't really know what's going on. I mean, there's no guarantees of what's going to happen next. And if we get too narrowly focused and our behavioral patterns become too regular and too even, we're going to find that we're not adapted to our environment anymore. So it's important to stay connected to the bigger environment of, as you say, a planet spinning around in a solar, just that awareness, because when you kind of connect on that level, you realize anything's really possible, that you don't have to always fit into what the system tells you you should be doing. And that's sort of what nature and evolution kind of are gearing us to, is always be adapting and changing, not just staying stuck in this kind of rigid mentality that I think a lot of us get used to from being in these institutions, from the time we're very young. It's not that these institutions didn't teach us something very valuable, but we don't want to forget our kind of natural connection to the natural world around us for a variety of reasons. And that's what planetary intelligence means to me. And one other little thing is, people always said, how can I become a better remote viewer? You become a better remote viewer by being more centered and more focused and more kind of present in your immediate setting, because that sets you up to receive that sort of information. So that's another kind of idea behind it.
Boy, that is amazing. Yeah, I just want to ask you this. Do you have you? I used to do a lot of camping. I got married, and I've done a lot of different things, but I used to do a lot of camping by myself. And I prefer to be outside, because I think you can learn more from just being in nature. It's like something's talking to you, and I'll give you an example. One night, I was out on the coast down by Claylock, and I'd found a place to go that I could get pretty near the beach on the Indian reservation. So I was camping there all by myself. The sea's a few yards away, and I'm looking at the stars. It's just a beautiful night. And I said, so what's the meaning of life? And the answer immediately came. The meaning of life is life. Because when you look out there, there's nothing. There's only life here, and you have to go a long way to find it. So you have to nurture life where you find it. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting, because the answer is in the question. So I thought that was pretty cool. But do you find that can happen if you become a lot more familiar with your surroundings and nature?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This goes back a long ways. Leonardo da Vinci, still one of the greatest geniuses of all time. That guy was just so ahead of his time, and he foresaw a lot of the technology that we use now, right? And he was an amazing artist and an incredible thinker. He would, even back then, I believe it was at the 1500s, he would get out of town as much as he could. Do you know that? Mm-hmm. He would get out of his town in Italy and go out into the hills and nature, because he always felt, and this is something I think of every day, that as amazing as the things that we create are, humans, it's still not as amazing as nature.
Exactly.
That there's something about the way nature does things which is just incredible, and we don't know why. It's almost impossible to figure out. We're part of it. That's a reason we can't figure out. All you can do is go back there as much as you can and surrender to it. Mm-hmm. And when you stop thinking so much and just you're present in nature, you get great freaking ideas that you can bring back to whatever you're working on. Like you have this question about life. You get amazing sorts of creative responses when you don't have all the noise. Mm-hmm. By the way, that's the secret to good remote viewing, is to lower the noise. So there are a lot of reasons to connect to nature, and I still always think that Da Vinci's reasons are some of the best, because still, no matter what humans do, it's never as good as what nature has already done. It's been around for so long. It's almost a meaningless statement to say that, but I mean, nature has kind of survived the test of billions of years. So whatever is around us works. And we can always glean real insights from it and learn a lot in a very practical way, too, that we can bring back to whatever we're working on in projects and businesses and so forth. So I agree with you. It's really important to get out there. And I still spend time up in Idaho when I can to go camping sometimes, because it's not only restorative, because we're all in some senses too busy now. We're all too connected. You need that off time, and you also need that time to connect to a deeper level of your own creativity. So yes.
Simeon, do you go up to the Panhandle? Is that where you're camping in Idaho?
It's not quite in the Panhandle.
Okay.
No, it's not quite in the Panhandle.
I love the Kellogg area, and then when you get over into the Bitterroots, that's just some of my favorite country. Besides out here on the West Coast.
Out there.
What's that?
Yeah, great places up there. No, great, beautiful places up there. And I think people like you and I should feel very lucky that we got exposed to that huge area of natural beauty, one of the most beautiful areas that I've ever been in the United States or really anywhere, because just to be around it, it's just that sense of calm that is very healing. Very healing and I find very helpful and productive.
Well, I always say, if I used to live in Alaska as well, if you want to see God, go to Alaska. Because you talk about your beautiful nature. Idaho is like a 7, but Alaska is definitely the 10. Idaho is amazing, but Alaska is just, it's everything nice about Idaho is everywhere in Alaska. So, all right, enough of our travel guide segment. I want to get into remote viewing, but I want to make sure that we've talked sufficiently about your books. So, another point that you made is that we get our information from a device. Now, traditionally, we get our information from another person, and we value that information or don't value it based on that person we got it from, correct? So here's another thing you might want to think about doing a book, because we're getting our information from these, right? Now, according to all our scientists and whatever, these are putting out they operate at a certain frequency, and this frequency corresponds to kind of a fight or flight in us, and it gets our brains. And I've talked to Dr. Nick Begich about this in Alaska a lot, and with the 5G and all that. All of this stuff that we're getting now, you have to make a decision, and the decision is being made for you, and the animosity and the hate and the crap you see on the internet, it's not because people are like that. It's because the machine, that's the signal that they're getting from the machine. So instead of having a response of what a bunch of garbage, people get angry, easily. So. Anyway, I think that's another sociological aspect.
No, that's true. No, very, very important. By the way, Matthew, that was even something I looked at back in my dissertation in the early 90s. Because computers had been around for a while then. We were all using PCs back then. Remember in the early 90s? And we had the IBM PCs and the Radio Shack Tandy devices. Apple was around, of course. And there was this observation that people, when they're typing and communicating this way, the information doesn't flow through the feeling center as much. So you're more likely to respond in, as you're saying, a very fight or flight mode, which is actually a kind of a type of de-evolution, right? Mm-hmm. It's a step going backwards, because we've spent thousands of years, millions of years learning manners. Mm-hmm. Almost the height of human evolution is manners. Wouldn't you think, in a sense, to treating strangers in a certain way, people you don't know, but having a kind of a sense of reciprocity and protocol? It's a real invention. But in some ways, having this immediacy of communication technology kind of can push it back, and people get into these, flame fests and all sorts of stuff, which, as you're pointing out, very well said, that it wouldn't happen if it was person to person, would it? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't happen.
Well, if the person's a jerk or doesn't speak well, or but I'm just saying that your reception of that information is almost, maybe, I don't know, you're the sociologist, but probably 60% based on what you think of the source and your reaction to the source. Yeah. So if your reaction to the source is this thing gets me excited and fidgety and scared, then what's your reaction almost always going to be? So. Anyway, okay, well, do you want to add anything else to that before we continue on with your grilling?
It's just something to be aware of, is that technology is not neutral. Okay, it affects how we actually. It affects the information itself. That was the whole. This has been my whole point ever since I've studied this stuff. It actually changes the information, and it's not just the same. Even like we're interacting on Skype now. That's a type of interaction. It's a lot more higher bandwidth than email, right? But the highest bandwidth is actually to be in proximity to someone. And there's different levels of communication based on the technology. We just need to be aware of the limitations. That's it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, it's proof to the pudding, or proof in the pudding, is that, you're aware, as probably most people are, of the 4 Fs. And we see a lot of, on the internet, we see fear and we see sex, because that's the stuff you want to look at. You want to be afraid, or, you want to see that attractive person, and everybody knows that, so everybody uses that. So it kind of fosters, it's a dog chasing its tail kind of thing. All right. Now, Dr. Hein, now is the time that we are going to switch modes, and we're going to start talking about remote viewing. I think that a lot of people know what it is. So I don't think we need to go into the history of it so much. But what I would like to do is I would like to talk about your personal experience with it. And if we have time, we're really running out. But then I'd like to talk a little bit about your experience with crop circles and UFOs. But first of all, can you you got your remote viewing experience from the Farsight, yes, Institute?
Right, yeah.
So can you tell us about how you got interested in that, and your experience, and what what happened there, what you came out of it with?
Yeah, I had just been in Boulder a couple weeks when I moved here in 1996, and I heard this guy called Courtney Brown talking on my local radio station, community radio station, KGNU, about this thing called remote viewing. And, I'm not too far out of graduate school, so my mind is thinking, BS, this can't be real. Maybe special psychics can do something. But Courtney was saying everyone had this ability to view and perceive non-local information. I thought, it's either got to be a hoax or it's got to be one of the biggest discoveries of all time. So I need to either one way find out. And I went over and got his book in the bookstore, and I signed up for one of his classes in Atlanta and ended up teaching there for a while. I took the class. I got the results that were quite astounding. You wouldn't think you can describe something that's hidden. We use folders like this. You wouldn't think if you take a picture and you hide it in a folder with a bunch of random numbers on it, you're going to be able to describe the contents. But miraculously, you actually can, some of the time. There's variation in it, but you get more than you should be if you were just guessing. And I found that very astounding, and it led me to believe that maybe there was a whole range of scientific knowledge that I hadn't been exposed to.
But I'm sorry if I missed that. My phone rang. I thought I had it on that airplane mode. Did you you went in as a skeptic? You didn't buy it at all?
Yeah.
Okay. But you changed.
Honestly, Matthew, I was open to the idea that it could be true, but I didn't go in thinking it was going to be true.
Okay. And how long had they been doing their stuff when you went there? Bless you.
Courtney had just been doing that about a year or two. He had just come out with his book earlier that year and been doing it for maybe, I think I was in his 4th or 5th class.
Wow. Are you still in his?
Just in the beginning.
Are you still in his good graces?
No, I don't work with Courtney anymore. I worked with him then, and I did serve on his board of directors for a couple of years with some of the things he's doing now with his nonprofit. Mm-hmm. But I actually haven't worked with him in a long time. And so the type of viewing I learned from him then is different than he's doing now. Mm-hmm. And I can't really comment on what he's doing now with it. All I can say is the system that he taught us back then was based on the SWAN method, the CRV system, SWAN being the New York City artist that Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ brought to SRI in the early 70s. to help them study, and he remote viewing, and Ingo kind of developed a protocol that he thought would work for any average person. He kind of reverse engineered what was going on in his mind. Ingo being a natural psychic. And so Courtney was kind of teaching pretty much a system based on that. And that's what I learned at the time. That's the system I still use, and that's still what I teach. I have actually a class coming up at the end of March here in Boulder. That's the system I still use because I find for most people it seems to work pretty well. It's a written system with a series of stages where you kind of slowly open the aperture on your perception and let the RV information come in.
All right. And so the progression from, I think it went from Ingo and the CIA, and then the Army got into it. And then you have Ed Dames. And Ed Dames is where I got exposed to it because in the 90s I was up in Alaska and they started doing these shows about remote viewing. So, and Ed was much younger then. He's a little bit older now, but still looking good. But so it went from Ed, and he taught Courtney, and then Courtney went off with his institute, and then you learned from Courtney, correct?
Right. And then I also learned from Lynn Buchanan, who was actually in the military RV program.
Oh, wow. You know Lynn. Wow. Okay. That's incredible.
With Lynn and
also, this is just one kind of obscure question. You've been on like all these shows like Coast to Coast and all those, yes? I think you have like your own page on Coast to Coast, don't you?
I haven't been there. I have been on Coast to Coast 6 times. Yeah, I did 6 times over the years. I mean, It's not a lot. That show's been going since the 90s. And I was on with Art Bell, I think twice.
Yeah.
And the other host, most recently with George Knapp after I came out with Black Swan Ghosts. I had an interview with George Knapp, I think in 2018 or 17. Yeah, so I've been on that show, and I most recently, Matthew, I was on the History Channel in Search of show with Zach Quinto last November about crop circles. Crop circles actually came out of remote viewing because Courtney had us view crop circles in 96. I didn't even know what that freaking word meant. I mean, having been in the Palouse with you at WSU in Pullman, I should have known what a crop circle was. I mean, it's made out of wheat, but there's a lot of wheat where you and I went to graduate school. It kind of goes on forever. I didn't know what a crop circle. So he had to say, what the hell is that? You know? And that's how I ended up going over there. I got to get feedback. Every time you do a target, and it's a hidden picture in here or something, a written cue, you get feedback at the end. So you can see, how did you do? Where's, what did you get? What did you sort of invent? And what feedback are you going to get for a freaking crop circle target? The crop circles he gave us were some of those really big ones that had shown up around that time period. And so, or the year before. So, 96. So I went over there in 97 to see for myself what are these, because I got some interesting data in my session about crop circles. One was the crop circle near Stonehenge from I think it was 96 that Julia set. And so I went over there, and lo and behold, Matthew, there was weird, freaky stuff going on around crop circles. I mean, for real. I know I'm a sociologist. I'm looking for urban legends and all this. No, there was really stuff going on around crop circles. Battery failure, camera failure, people's stuff stopped working, balls of light, UFOs were seen around them. It's stuff that I could see from talking to people. My training as a sociologist is to say, well, why are people inventing stories and, folklore? But there's the other side of it is maybe our generalized ideas about things are too limited, and there really is something going on. But because, you've had this training, you think you're Dr. So-and-so, you think you know what's going on. But actually, to this day, I still study crop circles. I still give tours of crop circles because we've seen a lot of anomalous phenomena around them. Matthew, we made one over in north of Pullman, one of those little towns up there, St. John or something. We found a farmer who would, and I went way back then. I made one with some other people because we publicly admit that we made the ones we make. We say, hey, we made this one. It's for testing. It's for testing our equipment and to see if we can recreate the anomalies. So crop circles itself is a really fascinating topic, and I don't care. Man-made UFOs. I mean, I'm not interested in the exact percentages of which is which. Once they're there, you get these weird electromagnetic effects, which you can demonstrate. It shouldn't be happening in an insulator like wheat. Think about it, Matthew. It's an insulator. Why are you getting electrical activity in wheat? Come on. There's something important going on there. And anyway, I still love the topic. I still love taking people in crop circles occasionally, making some of our own if we can find a farmer that's open to it, or even discovering some that we can't explain. The whole topic is really interesting to me.
Yeah. One thing that you disappointed me, because when I saw your thing on the crop circles, and I'm looking for, these are made by UFOs, and these are, ball UFOs coming down here, and they're doing this way. But the only results that I saw coming out of that from you was that the ones that are man-made, they exhibit some of the same characteristics of the ones that were supposedly made by UFOs. So that was kind of disappointing for me, but it's also very interesting. And this is going to segue us back to remote viewing, because is it the mental act of doing this that is interacting with these plants, do you think, or what is going on?
No, Matthew, it's a great question. I understand that people that I knew had this idea that they were all made by UFOs, and some of them were. Mm-hmm. It's a complex topic, and I like to go wherever the data lead me. That's science, right? We can't hold on to our preconceptions if we discover something else. I did discover teams of people making crop circles there, not initially, but around 2000. Mm-hmm. And they said, look, we just have to tell you what is going on out here. We're making some of them, mm-hmm. and maybe even most of them by the time I got out there in 97. But that doesn't mean the original phenomena was all man-made. In mm-hmm. Black Swan Ghosts, I had a witness who saw it in Usk, Washington. I don't know if you're familiar, if you've read the book.
Not yet.
Vopez. She passed after I interviewed her a couple of years ago. She was there picking huckleberries, the huckleberries in the Northwest, with her brother in Usk, Washington, which is I think it's part of Indian reservation there, northeast Washington State. And she saw a disc hovering there with the lights, and it sort of like hovered, like, moving like a leaf in the wind, that kind of classic pattern. And as it left, she said it made a rushing sound through the wind, and it flattened all the plants as it left. So I don't have any doubt that flying saucers do flatten plants. Mm-hmm. It's just that this phenomena has been around for so long, and there's so many different types of shapes and so many different sources of them. It's not easy to always say it's this percent is made this way. But I mean, all I can say is it's a mix. Mm-hmm. It's a mix. And that, as you're saying, Matthew, it was a big shocker to find out, because just like you, I was thinking, okay, the man-made ones are hoaxes, right? And the UFOs are the real ones, but that's not what it turned out to be. The man-made ones turned out to be real. Mm-hmm. Like it or not, that is the truth. They turned out to be real in the sense that they could make batteries short out and all sorts of other things happen. So that showed us that it wasn't just how they were made that was interesting. There was something about once the pattern was there, did it have topological effects on the planets that create what I call metallicity. Metallicity is a state where the electrons begin to act in a correlated wave-like way. Long-range correlated electron behavior, where the electrons act like waves. They're particles, and they also have a wave-like description that's equally true. They're both. And when they act in a wave-like way, you can get metallicity, current flow, right? Which is not something you would expect in plants. So this is what crop formations showed me and others, is that you get these sort of metallistic effects which is very close to what you see in superconducting, room temperature superconductivity, topological insulators, so-called, and other exotic quantum properties. So basically what I came to the conclusion is that these crop circles have some sort of exotic quantum properties by virtue of their shape and the designs and so forth.
Okay, so did your metallicity, did that stem from, didn't they find like little metal balls in some of these crop circles?
Yeah.
But that doesn't probably have anything to do with why you call it metallicity.
No, it's just related in the sense that that's what people expect to find there, because that's our sense of metal. That's our definition of metal, is metal balls, right? Mm-hmm. Meteoric dust. That's what our minds like to find. We all have this confirmation bias where we expect to see what we expect to see, right? We're all human. We've all got our Facebook groups, and we like to stick together, find what we expected to find because it's going to reward us from the group. Mm-hmm. But let's say you don't find what the group expected to find. As you said before, it's worse now than before because you're on all the time electronically, and you're going to get all sorts of nasty comments from the noisy, nasty negativists, as Stanton Friedman called them. They can even be other UFO researchers who expected it. Metal is metal. But what I found was that insulators could act like metal, right? Plant materials could act like metal and have possibly some sort of weird electronic effects that seems to move in the direction of superconductivity. And to me, that's a sort of important scientific finding. This hasn't just happened a couple times. It's happened a lot. But it doesn't happen in all crop circles. It's not like if you and I go out and make one, it's necessarily going to happen. But I found it happening in about 5 or 10% of them, which is enough over the years of seeing a lot of crop circles to know that there's something really weird about those shapes. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying weird in kind of a fun way because it produces a weird effects that you can't, you don't expect to go into a crop circle and have your camera stop working. The devices we have around us, cameras and phones and things, they kind of work day in, day out, don't they? How about if you keep going back into crop circles and you're like, what is going on with my camera? And I've got the videos on YouTube, by the way, Matthew. I put them on if you look for in my channel, my Simeon Hein Fractal Friend YouTube channel. You'll see I have a playlist of weird phenomena in crop circles that I've actually videotaped myself. This is not other people's. I've been in there when someone else's device just quit. And you don't just see this around town. You don't say, hey, my camera just stopped. That never happens. It's so rare. If that was true, Apple wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. Neither would anyone who makes Android devices if they had that high a failure rate. Okay. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I want to just throw in that you're familiar with ECETI Ranch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was down there last summer with Michael Hall, the paranormal lawyer, and the UFOI team. And they were telling me the same story, that their stuff gets drained when they start filming these UFOs, that they lost battery power in everything, just like that.
There you go. You see what I'm talking about? This is the same phenomena. I'm not saying it's a separate phenomena. I'm saying it's the same phenomena. Crop circles are often round. Mm-hmm. UFOs are often round, and they have this. This is one of the most established scientific facts that I know of beyond gravity. Is that UFOs affect people's devices. We've been hearing this, and people have experienced this for decades, right? Mm-hmm. Ford Motor Company, I'm told, even though I haven't found the study itself, I'd love to see it, wrote a paper about why UFOs cause cars to stall. And you just gave us another great example at the ECETI Ranch, where people photographing these UFOs. What did they say? The cameras stopped working, mics, all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah, and these are not cheap. These are not cell phones. These are very expensive and
National
huge battery packs.
Yeah, no, National Geographic Channel one. I was out with them filming near Silbury Hill in this beautiful Aztec-like formation a couple of years ago. They didn't end up using the footage from the interview, but I was saying stuff like this, and at the time they seemed to enjoy it, but the editors cut it all out. So all you see in the final cut is a picture of my hand holding a static device. But they told me that they had been by Silbury Hill, this old, huge earth mound, the oldest, largest earth mound in Europe, where they had their camera stopped so badly, they're expensive, a professional video camera, they actually had to call back to London for instructions about how to restart it. So
crazy.
There you go.
All right. Well, Simeon, we are running out of time. I really need to ask you some questions about remote viewing.
Yes.
I know if you'll give me just maybe about 5 or 10 more minutes, and then you can talk about Mount Baldy Institute, and that will probably be it. So let's talk about the process of remote viewing. You talked about CRV. So I'll just explain this just to hurry things along. You have a target, and a person knows the target, puts the target in an envelope, and gives it to the remote viewer. That's correct, right? But it is the person who knows the target.
Audio broke up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a target, and you have a person who selects the target. They, I assume, put that in a envelope or something, and then they give it to the remote viewer. And that remote viewer is then blind, correct?
Not entirely. A target is selected. It could be selected by a computer.
Okay, but you can't select your own target.
Telepathy. We're not talking about sending.
Yeah, but you cannot select your own target. You don't know what that target is.
You're right. It's either single blind, which means that the viewer doesn't know what it is, or double blind, where the monitor doesn't know what it is either. Mm-hmm. But a target has been selected. A viewer, and you're absolutely correct that the viewer views it mostly blind. Now, listen, in real applied settings, the viewer might know something about the target. When people come to you and say, "Find my missing cat," you know it's a cat. Your job is to look over a geographical area and locate it. Mm-hmm. But in the kind of the purest setting, there's no information given about the target ahead of time.
Okay. So has anybody done any studies between the, what do you call them, the monitor?
Yeah, the monitor is the person that might assist in the session. They might interview the viewer and get information from them without telling them anything about what is in the target, but just to help the viewer keep moving along so they don't, they don't get too paralyzed by their own sense of doubt.
What I'm looking at really is I'm just trying to find out, at some point, is the viewer, is he being influenced by, I guess, ESP, but somebody knew what that target was. And is that person making a connection? And this is the question I'm kind of leading up to. Is that remote viewing for espionage is different than remote viewing, like, just finding what's in the envelope, et cetera, just to see how good you are? Where do you think you have the highest results of success? Do you have it with people are looking for what's at this place in Russia, they don't know what it is? Or do you have higher results when they put a picture of a cat in an envelope and give it to the remote viewer?
It's a very good question. It's something that a lot of people have spent a lot of time on. Does the mindset of the monitor or the people involved in the project, not the viewer, but the other people, do they affect the outcome? And they can. So sometimes the best way to do it, not during training where you're just trying to get anything going. See, because if the monitor knows what it is or sends information to the viewer, it's called telepathic overlay. In other words, the viewer may be viewing the mind of the monitor and not the target. Mm-hmm. And you can control for that by having it be double blind so the monitor doesn't know what it is either. And I have seen right here in Boulder in our own classes where viewers got excellent results where it was double blind, where nobody knew what the target was. So it can work very well. I'm not sure what the statistics show us about whether double blind is more accurate than single blind. But there are obviously things that need to be controlled so that it really is the viewer getting their own information without any contamination. Yeah. Obviously, critics, and this is what SRI had to deal with for years from their government sponsors, is critics would say, there's some information leakage coming in here, that they're getting it some other way. So at SRI, they had like a Faraday cage room, where they would lock the door and there's no way. And obviously the skeptic would always say, well, maybe, and, it's this room and it's on, it's not on rubber shock absorbers, but it's designed so there's no leakage. And I was told by Russell Tartt that he saw Uri Geller bend a spoon in another room. And Uri was strapped down to the chair in the Faraday cage room.
Wow.
Because people always said, there's got to be some trick. When Russell said to me, I was talking with him at a conference, where's the trick? I mean, he's in a room, it's locked, he's strapped down, and the spoon's still bent.
Wow.
So that's an extreme example, but I'm saying, believe me, the controls have been put in place to make sure that it is not information contamination. Now, when you're training people initially, me, the monitor, whoever the monitor, they're going to know the target, because even if the viewer is getting it telepathically from the monitor's mind, they're still using some sort of psychic functioning, and you want to encourage any of that in the beginning. But for the purposes of controlled science experiments, it would have to be double blind or triple blind.
Okay.
I mean, just literally so that nobody would know what it is at it.
Okay. Simeon, how much time? You got 5 more minutes?
Yeah, let's go for another 5-10 minutes. And
Okay. I need to ask you then, because with all this remote viewing, we're building up to UFOs and aliens. So
yes.
I want to ask you about your personal experience viewing aliens and UFOs. But before we do that, I've always had this question. You remember the Phoenix Lights, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when remote viewers, I think it was Daz Smith. It was some of Courtney's guys, Daz or the guy in Hawaii. And I'm sorry if I don't remember your name, but I will when this is over. I always do. But they said that they went back and they remote viewed this UFO. So they're inside the UFO, and there's like I guess there's a alien, lizard, reptile person flying it. And so they kind of, I don't know if they communicated with them or not. My question is, what is that? How does that work? Because they had to go back in time. And what is the alien just hanging around in that part of time, waiting for somebody to come and remote view them?
Well, that raises a lot of good questions.
But they're interacting with this. They're claiming to interact with this thing. It's not like they're looking at a past event. And there's a few of them.
Yeah, no.
And Ingo Swann said that people told him they didn't want him on the moon. So, but that wasn't necessarily the past.
Yeah, I mean, why not? It can be a two-way street.
But
it's designed to be a one-way street, but it can be a two-way street. And I'm going to challenge your idea that anyone's going back in time.
Okay.
From an RV point of view, everything's happening at once. We have labels for things we call future and past. Our minds like those labels. It's more comfortable to think that there is a past. This morning when you and I woke up and thought about the interview, and a future, what will be happening after this interview is over. That's our minds like this sequential idea of time. That's how our perception works. Just because we perceive it that way doesn't mean that that's how it really works. Mm-hmm. And another way to look at it is that everything's happening simultaneously with a frequency which gives it a locational place in space and time, which allows us to map things into a sense of past, present, and future. And so when Daz and Dick, I think we're viewing, Dick Algeier, maybe you're referring, when they're viewing this, I'm not familiar with that incident. Again, I'm not familiar with everything that Farsight did after, I left in the late 90s, but it's happening in real time.
Okay.
It's not like the viewer is physically going anywhere. They're tuning into that sort of resonant signal. It's not much different than tuning into the room that's around you. You're kind of tuned into that, right? You're getting the light and the sounds and the frequency. Yeah. Well, you could tune into another place in this map of space and time and get the signals, the resonant information from that space. And who's to say it doesn't work two ways? I mean, you're receiving, and we had that experience too when we viewed extraterrestrials in their ships. A number of times the viewers felt very uncomfortable. They said, I feel like they're aware of my presence. Well, join the club. I mean, you're playing, you're kind of playing at a higher level than you're normally trained to. Why wouldn't you expect to get some sort of two-way interaction. Nothing to be inherently, it's nothing wrong with that. It's not something to be, it's kind of a neutral situation. But I mean, if you put your awareness on a plane right now that's taking off in Chicago and you focus on the cockpit, right? That pilot's probably too concerned right now to focus on getting that plane off the ground. He's not going to be aware that you're remote viewing him or her, right? But you're dealing with some sort of more evolved creature, being. Maybe they have this sense when someone else is tuned into them, and that hey,
yeah,
you get this. I don't know. So that's my sense of it. That's my sense of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I have just I guess two more questions. I mean, I'm like a kid that's getting pulled away from the carnival, but I have two more questions, and the first question is. Gosh, I was going to ask you about these aliens because I wanted to hear you talking about a story. But these, so
okay.
we're third dimension, and if you say that they exist like where there's no time, well, that's fourth dimension. So, and I know you don't know the answer, but are you remote viewing? Are you guys moving into the fourth dimension where there is no time, and that's why you're able to do this as a possible theory?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what a viewer is actually doing, is they are deliberately suspending their participation for a limited amount of time in this thing we call 3D reality, and putting their perception onto another space where the rules are different and future events are there as probabilities, right? Mm-hmm. Past events are there. Well, actually, like probabilities too. It seems a little more definite. That's a whole other issue. But you're moving your awareness right now. Matthew, we all have this experience every day. It's called dreaming. When you go to bed at night, you have dreams, right? Things seem to move around in time. You jump from here to there, right? It could seem like a cartoon movie. Impossible things happen, right? That's like viewing. Viewing is like a structured daydream. It's like that dreaming at night, a little more structured, but because you're awake. Mm-hmm. But we all have this experience already of moving around, but we don't consider that to be real. When we wake up in the morning, we say, it wasn't real, right? I'm glad that wasn't real, right? That was just a dream. Mm-hmm. But let's say you deliberately go back into that dream space because you want to get information about X, Y, or Z, or just for the fun of it. You're going back into that same space, but you're doing it awake. So now you have this awake mind, which you have while you're awake, and you have this dreaming mind, which you normally only experience while you're sleeping. But it's a little more structured, and now they kind of communicate to each other. It's kind of a sense of what it's like.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna give you your freedom. I just want to throw one crazy idea at you. It's a rhetorical question more than anything. But going back to crop circles, mm-hmm. Is there a chance that those are not even meant for us? And I kind of have an idea. Those are like graffiti that possibly they don't care about us. They don't care if we see them or not. These are for the other ETs. Maybe they're sending some kind of messages to them, or maybe they're just trying to show a neat picture, or I don't know, but maybe they're just messages to the other aliens.
Nice try, Matthew.
Oh, it's had to. I mean, I'd throw that in there.
Could be right.
I have a lot of weird ideas.
We don't know. How do we really know?
What's that?
We don't know. I mean, it could be all of the above. I know that we want it to be one thing or the other. Yeah, it could be a lot of things. Mm-hmm. By the way, I have to leave you with one story. I was told by someone that was familiar with Eastern Washington that there was a farmer in Pullman had some craft come down in his field right near town in the 70s. Did you ever hear about that?
Mm-mm.
And had the beans got out of the craft in the wheat field. It wasn't far out of town. It was like pretty close in there before you and I were there. So,
wow, I'll have to look into that.
I guess I would have. So here's what I think, Matthew. Here's my guess about what's going on in the bigger picture. I don't think we know as much as we think we know about what's going on. I think our history is bigger than we thought it was. I think if we look back, we're going to find, just like this incident I mentioned about a UFO landing in a wheat field in Pullman, I bet these things have happened a lot and people didn't talk about it, right? Because of the giggle ridicule factor. So I wouldn't be surprised if our entire history of the human race gets rewritten. Yeah. Because these events have been happening around us the whole time. And our response has mostly been to deny it, right? It's not true. It can't be true. But let's say it is true. All of it. I'm talking, Bigfoot to UFOs, to strange effects from crop circles, UFOs making some of the crop circles, remote viewing, precognition, all these things that we consider weird. How about if they were actually normal? And the weird ones were those who said it can't be true. You know what I mean? Just like there were people at the time when electricity was being developed that thought it was like a type of witchcraft. Really? Before scientists could explain it in terms of electromagnetic field, it was considered witchcraft. You know that vacuum spaces inside glass were considered supernatural?
Wow.
That's how far we've come. What's the supernatural? I guarantee you the supernatural of today will be the science of tomorrow. No doubt about it. This is all going to be shown to be real with a physics we don't understand it yet. I love to dabble in it. I'm not saying I have the final explanations of what makes all this work, but I bet it's all going to be shown within 100, 200 years to be science fact. Even things like cold fusion, which, boy, talk about a controversial topic and hard to make that cold fusion process work. But I've spoken to experts, world-renowned experts, who've said, oh, no, it's real. We were able to reproduce it in the lab, at least for a couple of weeks. We couldn't sustain it.
Well, they're using it.
So I think the limitation is our mind.
Yeah.
What's that?
They're using it. They, I saw this thing on it, and they actually used the experiment. They're making cold fusion now, or doing it. And it's so long since I saw it, I don't want to say too much.
And to get back to your original points right at the beginning of this interview, there's something about American society where it's very short-term oriented. Our memories don't go back past 200 years. Other societies have memories that go back thousands of years. American society is a young culture. So we don't think back past 200 years. It's not necessarily our fault, but it leads politicians to be focused on the short term. And what does that lead to happen? Everything gets classified, as you mentioned to me at the beginning. So all of this stuff is there. I've seen it. The declassified. Russell Tarr got tons of it declassified from the CIA about remote viewing. We found they were concerned about Russia and Chinese psychics and all this. There are people that know this stuff is real because of the classification system and the Cold War. It's not anyone's fault, but this is just what ended up happening. And Hanford and things like this, a lot of this information got behind a classification wall. And I think when it starts coming out, we're going to find out that the information has been there, that these phenomena are absolutely real, that someone has known about it, but for a variety of reasons, it's not just to deny the truth. It's just because, well, it's the classification system is a self-perpetuating thing. It's very hard. It's challenging for people in the system to declassify anything because they risk going to jail. So there's a lot of reasons why we're not talking about this. But, Matthew, that's my conviction. These phenomena are real. It's another type of science. I say we get on our way and start studying it. Yeah, it takes a risk, but, hey, why not take the risk? I mean, what are you waiting for? We're talking about life and reality here. And I certainly didn't intend, after my graduate experience at WSU, to lock myself in a box and say, oh, I'm not looking at anything outside what I learned in Wilson Hall. Right?
Yep.
That would be silly. It hasn't been the easiest road to travel, but it's been super exciting. And you never know what's going to happen next. And I think we're on the verge of discovering a lot of really cool stuff related to all these phenomena. And we're going to find that it was all real, and we've had these contact with these UFOs, wherever they're from. We've been having this contact for quite a while, and that there are a lot of witnesses out there that haven't spoken yet.
Yeah.
That's my feeling about it.
Yeah. Well, I liked your, what was your, you said that what is supernatural now will be science in the future or something? That's a title for your book.
Robert Heinlein said this. I remember reading his Stranger in a Strange Land, in the 70s in high school. And he always said that the science fiction of today is the science of tomorrow.
Yeah. And
so my feeling is the paranormal of today is the science of tomorrow, right? It's already sort of normal. It's just paranormal, which means it's like next to normal. It's just another type of normal. And we have this conditioning. I can say this as a sociologist to want to play it safe, stick with the crowd for the most part. There's a lot of incentives, and we give in a little too easily to what maybe not in our longer interest in terms of scientific discovery. Right? And so we need to take the risks and go places where people haven't gone before scientifically to look at this, not just behind classified institutions that cannot legally share their information with the rest of us. This has to be done on the civilian side. Or, Matthew, you know what's going to happen? Russia and China and other countries that are not afraid of these topics, they're going to make super scientific discoveries, and we could find ourselves in a whole different planet. That's how serious it is. And I'm not just making this up. What did Tom DeLonge and the people at To the Stars Academy say? It's a Sputnik moment. What's the Sputnik moment?
Yeah.
When that thing comes flying overhead in 1957 and you realize you don't have one and they do.
Yeah.
And that's what the United States woke up to in 1957, is that we were falling behind technologically. You know, it's hard for people to think that nowadays, but there was a time we were falling behind. And I don't think that should happen again.
Yeah.
I don't think that should happen.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, because in China and Russia, you're classified already. In an open society, it's very hard to hide stuff, and you have to threaten people and you have to scare people, just like those other people. I don't know. It's a tough question. Before we go, can you tell us a little bit about Mount Baldy, the Mount Baldy Institute? That's what it's called.
Yeah. I started this company, back in '97, because I said, wow, people that do this RV, they get a lot of really good benefits out of it. I mean, they discover things. I don't know ahead of time what exactly each person's going to discover. They discover something about themselves, about how their minds work and how they receive information and creativity and all these things. So I said, someone should have a place where people can go and just keep learning this. So anyway, I started this institute here in Boulder. I'm still here decades later. It's a long time ago, 1997, yeah. And I'm still teaching people RV, and we still give crop circle tours and all this stuff, because the best way for people to experience this is to experience it yourself, make your own mind up. I never want to be the person to tell anyone how it has to be. Every person is the best judge of that for themselves, but they need to see it for themselves. So you come in here and take a class like we'll have at the end of March, a 3-day class, and you can decide for yourself, is RV for real or not, based on your own experience in the class. Most people, I think, find there's really something going on there that they didn't expect. They really have some sort of ability they didn't think they had. I found that for myself. And so the best way is to have your own experience and you make your mind up. I'm never going to tell anyone exactly how things are, because I don't even know either. All I know is the way we've been doing the one thing I know, the way we've been doing things, Matthew, it's just a little too limited. And maybe that's an understatement.
Yep.
There's just more going on and more human potential in nature that we're not really working with that we should be, because, hey, it's there. Why not engage these abilities and these processes that can give us information? It's free, so why shouldn't we be taking advantage of it?
So, Dr. Hein, your Mount Baldy Institute, you teach remote viewing there?
Yeah, I do. We call it resonant viewing, because obviously I think it's type of resonant. Yeah, I have classes online. People can go to virtualviewing.org. I have online classes where I recorded the videos from the class, and you can study it at your own pace. You don't even have to come here. You can do it at home with my self-paced class. I just went through all the stages, and people have told me it really worked for them. That's why I keep it going. You go through the stages, and I say, now try this and do this, and I have targets, and it's recorded. And obviously people can correspond with me by email or through Skype on the phone to get other instruction, but it's kind of a self-paced class, and that's at virtualviewing.org. And then I also have live classes that I teach right on Pearl Street here in Boulder, Colorado. Same place I've been teaching it for over 2 decades. And we have another one. We had a couple classes in 2019. We'll have one coming up in March here in 2020. And also, I will be at the Contact in the Desert free 4-day event in Joshua Tree in May, June. So anyone who's going to that, we can catch up there, hang out, and
are you speaking there?
Shoot the breeze.
Simeon, are you speaking
there? I'll be on the. I am speaking there. I am speaking. We're going to have to cover this topic the next time, Matthew.
Yeah, the next time.
Because I'm speaking about parallel realities and multiverses as possible, sources of UFOs, likely sources of UFOs, parallel realities. So we got into it a little bit here with time, but we can flesh it out in another interview.
Great.
And I'll be talking about parallel realities. I'll be on the panel with Russell Targ and Stephen Schwartz about the secret history of remote viewing. I do actually know something about this classified side of this psychic research that's actually never been made public before. People have told me who've worked at the Department of Defense about these things. No, it's really true. There really was a secret history to it. And I will be panel and we'll be doing a 2-hour remote viewing workshop at Contact in the Desert.
Okay. Exciting.
And it looks like there's going to be a lot of good.
All right.
Anyway, that's what's going on.
Dr. Hein, the last thing I'm going to say before I release you is we are doing a project this summer. We have the UFO I-Team. We have the North American the American Primate Conservancy, which is Bigfoot, and we have the North American Dogman Project. We're going to do a joint project. We're going to select a certain area, and we're looking for UFOs, Bigfoot, or a Dogman in that area. We're going to seal it off, and we're going to put up our equipment. We need a remote viewer. So we can talk about this later, but I mean, we do need a remote viewer because we kind of want to cheat to get some results. So maybe you could consider it. We're probably going to do it in the end of June, beginning of July. So you are definitely invited to join us on our expedition. And I'm not going to tell you, we're keeping our location where we're going to be working secret, but we won't for you. And we'd sure like to invite you to come and remote view for us, or have some of your students remote view some of our stuff. So
great. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, all right. I guess I'm going to have to let you go now. I really, it's really been nice talking to you. It's been a great honor. I love the stuff that you've done. And like they say, great minds think alike. And we really seem to see eye to eye on a lot of things. So, Dr. Simeon Hein, thank you for being on Encounters USA. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for our audience?
Go Cougs.
Yes, indeed. You ready to sing the fight song? I'll spare people. I'll spare people that. Actually, I only know.
No, the thing is, the parting message is there's a lot more true than we've been told. A lot more truths about things. You got to follow your own thread. You can trust your own intuition on this. Believe me, I've been doing it for a couple decades now since WSU. And I'm glad I got trained to follow the evidence at WSU because it's where it led to all this. So follow your own breadcrumb and don't let other people discourage you from following it. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. All right. Well, everybody out there, Simeon, do you want to say something else?
No, that's it. Thanks for having me here, Matthew. And I'm always looking to feel free to get in touch with me. I'm always looking forward to working with folks. And
all right. And just let me remind people, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more great interviews like this. And I will have the links to Dr. Hein's books in the description on YouTube, as well as a link to the Mount Baldy Institute. So, with all that under our belt, I just want to warn you, if you're down in Colorado, especially near Boulder, and you're hanging out with Dr. Simeon Hein, always watch your back. Thanks for joining us on Encounters USA. Remember, if you have comments, please leave them in the comments section on YouTube and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell while you're at it. don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on Encounters USA, just send us an email at encountersusa1@gmail.com and just put podcast guest in the subject line. Now, please remember that all of the guests' opinions on Encounters USA are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the podcast host nor the podcast sponsors. So thank you, and don't forget, when you're out in the woods looking for aliens, Bigfoot, or Dogman, always watch your back.